Hello, it's Jenny Rotten. I have another really crappy paper to read. This one comes to us from January 30th of 2021. It is, of course, PubMed, National Library of Health and Medicine, Associations of Exposure to PFAS and the Mixture with Persistent Infections. There's some recent findings from 1999 to 2016. And the abstract reads, certain viruses and parasites can cause persistent infections that often co-occur and have been associated with substantial morbidity and mortality. Separate lines of research indicate exposures to PFAS suppress the immune system. We hypothesize that PFAS exposure might systematically increase susceptibility to persistent infections, resulting in a higher pathogen burden. We use data from 8,778 individuals, 3,000 adolescents, 5,000 adults in the nationally representative United States, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey that was done in 1999 to 2016 to examine cross-sectional associations between serum concentrations of four highly detected PFAS, PFOS, PFOA, PFHX, and PFNA with the persistence of antibodies to the cytomegalovirus, the Epstein-Barr virus, hepatitis C and E, herpes simplex 2, HIV, T. gondii, and Toxocara SPP. Remember, these are herpes type viruses. All of these are herpes type viruses. That's the same thing as the CV. Seropositivity was summoned to calculate a pathogen burden score reflecting the total number of infections. Separate survey weighted multivariable regression models were fitted to analyze PFAS individually and quantily. G computation was used to analysis the PFAS mixture. And among the adolescents, 38.7% of them had at least one persistent infection, while 14.9% had two or more. Among adults, these percentages were 48.0% and 19.7%, so a good bit higher, within 10 points here and 5 points there. Each PFAS was individually associated with significantly higher pathogen burdens, and the most pronounced associations were observed in adolescents. Among adolescents, a doubling of PFOS was associated with 30% higher pathogen burden. They reveal that PFAS mixtures as a whole were also associated with higher pathogen burdens. Taken together, these results suggest PFAS exposure may increase susceptibility to and foster clustering of persistent infections, particularly among our adolescents. And since persistent infections are important contributors to long-term health, prospective data are needed to confirm these findings. They need more research. And there you go. There is thank you. There is some background. I believe that this would also play a role in what we're seeing going on right now, with long COVID, et cetera, et cetera. Here is their papers. I mean, their methods, their little, what are these called? Diagrams, whatever those are, figures. Okay. So as you can see, they've done a lot of work. Let's go down to the meat. The results. Population characteristics of geometric means concentrations of the four PFAS measured in serum are presented in the table 4. The population was about half female and mostly non-Hispanic white. Socioeconomic status was varied, with approximately 1/3 of the individuals reporting a family income of less than 1.3 times that of the appropriate federal poverty threshold, and another 1/3 reporting the income that was 3.5 times that amount. So that is to be considered. The most common infection among adolescents was Epstein-Barr virus, EBV, while the most common infection among adults was herpes simplex virus. Distribution of summoned seropositivity or pathogen burden are provided. And then there are more tables. Let's see, that's their tables. And I gotta get past that. Some models, some other information. And in the discussion, it says that PFAS exposures have been studied with respect to human immune function, although most epidemiologic investigations have focused on antibody-mediated immunity. Data from the animal studies, however, suggest that PFAS exposure also suppress non-specific immune responses. Could you imagine that this knowledge could be used in conjunction with certain things that have been happening to create the very outcomes we are seeing and talking about? I would say yes. I would say yes. Hit again. Hit again. And these things just don't sound good. And yet here we are. In summary, we are the first to evaluate environmental PFAS exposures in relation to persistent infections. We observe higher exposures to PFOS and PFOA were associated with higher numbers of infections or pathogen burden, a composite measure that appears to increase the risk for subsequent chronic disease and mortality. While confirmation of our findings with prospective data isn't still necessary, lowering exposures to PFAS exposures, particularly during the youth, may decrease infectious disease susceptibility and a long-term consequence of persistent infections. So if we can lower the children's exposure to PFAS, we can get rid of forever chemicals. Our children stand a chance. If we don't, they are going to have an adult life, and if they make it to an elder life, full of persistent infections. Don't you think that sounds important? Anyway, this research was supported by the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. Of course, I'm sure that that there'll be plenty of people who are going to, fight against this possibly. But here are some references where they got their information for this paper. And you can see the dates there: 14, 19, 12, 2012 there, 2019, 2013, 16, 14, 19, 701 even made an appearance. The prospective studies of pathogen burden and risk of myocardial infraction or death. That was from 2001. Anyway, intestinal disorders associated with tissue damages induced by PFAS exposure. That's all I can think, is they have a severe case of Munchausen by proxy. They definitely, and don't forget who made an appearance. They want to make you sick so that they can, in fact, try and make you better